Hello guys, welcome back to my channel. In this video, I'll be showing you how I made this shirred bodycon dress. So if you're interested in how I achieved this look, please stay tuned. Alright guys, let's get started. Here's the fabric that I'll be using. I believe it's a cotton knit. It could be a type of rayon. I'm still learning my fabric guide, so bear with me. Whatever fabric you choose, it must be lightweight, preferably non-stretch. If your fabric is too heavy, the elastic thread may not be able to gather the fabric as well. I have this bodycon to trace for the pattern. I made sure to choose one with armholes because that will help in making the pattern for the sleeves. Here's the elastic thread I'll be using for the shirring. This thread measures at 5 millimeters, but 1 millimeter elastic thread will work as well. I also have a few empty bobbins and I'll show you how to thread them later. To make the front and back patterns for the dress, I start off with fabric on the fold. I take the bodycon dress folded in half and fold the top under the neckline. I place the dress 6 inches away from the fold and about an inch under the top edge. Then I cut the fabric along the other side a ½ inch above the dress. When I get to the end, I cut down an extra 4 inches to elongate the dress. For the sleeves, I measure around my upper arm, divide that measurement by 2, then add 3 inches for the width. That gave me 8 inches. For the length, I measure how long I wanted it to be, starting about 4 inches down my shoulder, all the way down to my hands, or the end of my fingertips, which ended up being 33 inches. So in short, I cut 8 by 33 inches on the fold. To cut the armhole on the sleeves, I line the top end corner of the armhole of the dress and the top end corner of the sleeves together on the side of the raw edges and cut along that curve. Next, I double hem the bottom and the top edge of the front and back piece. I also double hem the bottom edge of the sleeves. I won't be hemming the top edge of the sleeve, but I will be making a case for some elastic there later. So to make the hemming process a bit easier, I go ahead and fold a ½ inch once and press in place. Then I fold over a ½ inch again and press in place. Again, that's for the top and the bottom edge of both the front and back piece, and the bottom edge of the sleeves as well. The top of the sleeve will be left alone for the casing later. When the hemming is done, this is when you can measure your shirring lines. To do that, you can take a ruler and any kind of fabric marker or chalk and measure a ½ inch in between each line across the front and back piece horizontally. This will be a process in itself, but it will be worth it if you need those guidelines. So the way I'll be sewing is in one continuous stitch, a ½ inch in between lines and a ½ inch away from the edges all the way down. But I'll get into detail about that later. Before sewing, I prepare my bobbin with the elastic thread. To do that, I unwind a good amount of the elastic thread first. Then I take the end of the elastic thread and pull that through the small hole of the bobbin. I hold the end of that thread down and with the other hand, I begin to wind the thread onto the bobbin. This has to be done by hand so that you can ensure this thread isn't being pulled too tightly, so keep that in mind when you're wrapping around, not too tight but not loose. And here's the threaded bobbin when complete. At the machine, I remove my previous bobbin and grab my elastic threaded bobbin. I cut the excess thread off the top. Then I place the bobbin inside with the tail of the thread to the left, counterclockwise. I take the tail of the thread and pull that tightly through the notch as I hold the bobbin down, then place the top plate back on top. I set my stitch at the widest at 5 and loosen the tension a couple notches down as well. I go ahead and wind the needle once and pull the bobbin thread up. Then I start stitching a 1/2 inch from the edge and 1 inch below the top edge of the dress. Now at this point I realized I made a mistake of placing the fabric on the wrong side onto the machine. I had to flip the fabric over so that the elastic would be on the inside of the dress. So because I cut the thread, I had to pull the end of the elastic through the notch, then back up through the machine once more. So again, with the fabric facing up this time, I start a 1/2 inch from the edge and a 1/2 inch under the first stitch and begin sewing lines to the other side. As you can see, the fabric does begin to gather itself as you're stitching, so I make sure to stretch the fabric as flat and straight as I can before it hits the needle. When I get to the other side, I make sure to stop a 1/2 inch before the end. Then I turn the fabric to the other side, lift the needle up, move the fabric over and position the needle a 1/2 inch under the previous stitch. Then I lower my needle at that point and continue stitching to the other side. I continue this process until I get to the bottom. Here's what the front and back piece look like after they've been completely shirred. Next, I line them together front facing in and sew down the sides with an overlock stitch. Moving on to the sleeves. I placed my hand at the bottom and measure down to my wrist and mark at that point. From that point, I measure 4 inches up, marking at every 1/2 inch point. I mark the same measurements on this other side. Now I use those points as a guideline for shirring, and I use the same method as I did for the front and back piece of the dress. Here's a shirring around the wrist. Once complete, I ended up only sewing 4 lines across, back and forth. Next, I fold the sleeve in half, right side in, and sew down the side with an overlock stitch. When that's done, I turn the sleeve right side out, then I grab the dress and turn that right side out as well. Just to show you again, here's what the ruffles at the top look like, starting the stitch 1 inch below the top, and the ruffles below stopping 3 inches from the bottom. Moving on to the armhole, I line the side seam and the sleeve seam front facing in and pin together. Then I continue pinning along the curve on both sides. I sew along the curve with an overlock stitch. Here are both sleeves attached, and I also added an overlock stitch along the top edge of the sleeves. At the top of the sleeves, I have a little over a 1/2 inch overlap. This will be made into the casing for the elastic. To do that, I fold in about 1/4 of an inch at the sides and press. Then I fold the top edge of the sleeve down, making sure it lines up with the top edge of the dress, and press that in place. I do the same for the other side as well. Then I sew along the bottom edge of the fold with a straight stitch, making sure to leave the sides open. Here I have the casing with the open sides. For the elastic, I measure around my upper arm and divide that by 2, which for me was 5 inches. I take a safety pin and attach it to one end of the elastic. I insert it into one side of the opening and push and pull through just before the elastic goes through. I hold the end tight and carefully push the end of the elastic in just until it lines up with the edge of the opening and pin that in place. I find the safety pin and continue to push and pull the elastic through to the other side. I pull the elastic through and remove the safety pin. Just like before, I carefully push the elastic in and line the end along the edge of the opening and pin in place. Then I sew the ends closed with a straight stitch. When the casing is closed, I distribute the fabric evenly on both sides. Now the dress is complete. Alright guys, I hope you enjoyed the video. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you know when there's a new upload. See you guys in the next one. Bye!